Okay, I can't see anybody, but okay. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the keynote address for Remembering Taiwan's Martial Law. My name is Craig Smith, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Melbourne. So I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. And we are meeting, albeit virtually, on the traditional country of the Ngunnawal peoples. So I would like to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And to the indigenous peoples in the audience today, we extend our respect and thank you for joining us. So this conference was organized by the amazing Nancy Cho and Benjamin Penny and the wonderful team at the Center on China in the World. Once again, they put together a fantastic series of events, and today I'm the lucky person asked to introduce this keynote address. We are extremely fortunate to have with us Liang, perhaps the most intrepid of the small group of Taiwan's internationally famous writers. I first heard about Liang when I was in Taiwan. I first went to Taiwan in the late 1990s, and an American English teacher told me, check this out, Taiwanese literature is edgy. And at that time, The Butcher's Wife, Xiaofu Liang's most famous novel, was about 15 years old. She published it in '83, and it was then translated by Howard Goldblatt in 1986. When I returned to Canada to attend university, I found The Butcher's Wife was on many North American university reading lists as a feminist novel, one that showed readers that the tragedy of sexual violence and domestic abuse was both universal in that it was everywhere, and that it was particular and that it could be understood in relation to specific traditions and religions such as Taiwan. So since then, Liang has continued to be at the forefront of Taiwan's literary scene, always staying one step ahead in promoting social change, encouraging readers to reevaluate themselves in the world on issues of gender, on sexuality, and much more than that. Many of her short stories and novels are set in or connected to the tragedy of the 228 incident and the White Terror, the period of Taiwan's martial law that we're here to talk about at this conference. And although she has remained popular in Taiwan since her career began with a publication in the Zhongguo Shibao as a teenager in the 1960s, her work is now very popular internationally. About 10 years ago, I was asked to write a short piece on the translation of Liang's fiction into English for the magazine Lianhou Wenxue. And as a Canadian, I was surprised to find out that even more of her work was available in French than English. And she had been awarded the Order of Arts and Letters by the French Ministry of Culture in 2004, which only accelerated the already voluminous translation work in French. But in recent years, the Anglosphere has been catching up on translating the dozens of novels, the books of short stories, the poetry that Liang has published in the Chinese language. Sylvia Lin, who refers to Liang as one of the most sophisticated of the contemporary Chinese language writers, translated the novel The Lost Garden just a few years ago in 2015 with Howard Goldblatt. And even in the past few months, I have seen two short stories appear in English. Late Spring was published in the book Queer Taiwanese Literature, and Anti-Tiger in A Son of Taiwan, Stories of Government Atrocity, just in the last few months. And Anti-Tiger, which I just read recently, is particularly relevant to this week's conference. It's a story or a history of the woman communist Xie Xuehong, focusing on her sexualization and vilification during the martial law period from a very personal perspective. It's a very appropriate reading for the panels that are to come this week. So that's enough from me. Please, everybody, join me in welcoming Liang for her talk, Writing About Sex and Politics from Authoritarianism to Democracy.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
It's nice to see you again, Margaret. Okay. Okay, I'm a little bit nervous, but it's such a great honor to be able to give a talk here. And since English is not my my native language, and so I prepared something to read it a little bit, and so I think I will begin it now. And because we are talking about the martial law, and right now I think not only in Australia or in Taiwan, we are under the COVID-19. So I think a lot of people are kind of imprisoned in a way at home. And so this is probably the right time to talk about the martial law in Taiwan, because at that time people lost a lot of freedom. We cannot do just whatever we want. So let me begin my talk. And I think I invent this this term, a martial law generation. It haven't been used before, so far as I know. Probably some of you can tell me if this term, martial law generation, was used before. Anyway, okay, Taiwan was under martial law for 38 years, and I lived through 35 of them. You could say I'm of the martial law generation. And since I'm a woman writer, so you can add to that and say I'm a woman writer of the martial law generation. How do you like this term? I think it's interesting, no? Okay, the martial law period has been heavily documented, and I don't care to rehearse that record here. I'm a writer, so I like to look at this as a writer personally and through my writing. I was born and raised in the central Taiwan, in the town of Beigang, one of the Taiwan's renowned city of Qing dynasty. Conservative in its way, the town took pride in its former glory and its reputation for a culturally cultivated and highly liberate population. So we are so proud of ourselves in this small town nowadays. Under the constraints and the conservationism that came with martial law, Beigang became a hotbed of patriarchy and the suppression of women, where China Confucianism, 儒家主义 and Japanese male chauvinism converged. I was born 3 years into martial law in 1952, so you know how old am I? Too bad. I hope I'm much younger, but this is true. My father, who built his own business, grew up poor and unable to afford studying abroad in Japan. He was educated locally. But my father, as a self-professed believer in communism, he strongly believed that communists can save the world, because I think he's from a poor family. So he thinks communism supposed to be the salvation, of the poor people. So he sent us all 6 children away to study abroad. My mother came from a large family. She was intelligent and exceptional competent. I was loved as the youngest of 6. In my mother, I could see the traditional Taiwanese woman. No need for from behind the she doesn't have to stand in front, but she always kind of hide behind my family, my father, but he always achieved what she wanted. This is something I think that stood me in good stead to weather the accusation and the enormous frustration that my writing would bring on. I think I'm really brave. A German director who made a documentary of my writing, and she called me fearless Beigang, which means I'm not afraid of anything. I think that's probably is a good description of me. Free of economic pressures, that I have to thank to my family and my father. I could write what I wanted without compromise. True, I'm a rebellion and a controversial writer, but I constantly ask myself, why are my novels so dark, shut through with all the deeper recesses of human nature and the corruptions of society? From the time I published Flower Season, 花季, as a 16-year-old girl in high school, my work has broken a major taboo of their times, sex. It would be easier to attribute this to my study in Freud work back then. But looking back, I see it got to do with my middle school education, especially during the martial law. I received my 6th year of secondary education at Zhanghua Nuzhong. The content of the textbook, in my opinion, were only outdated Confucian and Neo-Confucian patriarchy. The way I saw it at that time, school authorities and the society at large was spouting hypocritic cliché, while the reality all around was just the lies and their cover up. I think I'm not the only one who said the whole society of Confucianism is based on lie. The young woman director who just won the Oscar award, she said, okay, the whole Chinese, the Confucianism is all based on lie or something like that. And that's why her film cannot be shown in even in Hong Kong. Anyway, so I probably am not the first one to say that the whole society was lie and cover up. Okay, come back to my writing. Okay, I'll give you a few examples of what I have been through for the during the martial law period. For example, if my school received a love letter sent to one of us from a boy, we could be punished regardless, since certainly it would all be chalked up to our provocations. Anytime we were out of school and not at home, we still had to wear our school uniform, or the better to keep tabs on us. And if we got caught out of school not in uniform, the penalty was harsh. And our teacher, I don't know how they make us believe that, okay, we will be recognized outside of the school. We did not wear uniform. But gosh, we have this the school has almost 2,000 students. How can the teachers know the 2,000 students and able to punish us without wearing a school uniform? But stupidly, I don't know why, we actually believe the school and the teacher can do things like that. So the lies and, you know, this kind of studies truly, I think, influenced us a lot when we were young. Our hair length had to be kept at 3 centimeters above our ear, how would you call this, ear lobes, 3 centimeters above. Broke cut style, leaving half the back of our head exposed. And our skirt has to be 10 centimeters below the knees. So which means we cannot show our leg at all. The director of discipline who supervised us for years was a middle-aged military retired who lived in a tiny house on the school ground. He could enter our dormitory at will to check for unbecoming behaviors. But then we senior students were already 18 years of age. But you know, the director of discipline can, you know, just pop in our dormitory and to try to find we are doing something wrong. And that's happened for my high school life. I read novel in translation, existentialism, 存在主义, and the other philosophies that shape the core of my thinking. But concerning women were my top priority because of the personal relevance. I read Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, and meet Li Xiulian, our vice president. And on her return from the States, she started to the whole women's liberation movement in Taiwan. From the example of my mother, I believe women could make a difference. I really have to thank a lot to my family and especially my mother. Okay, my next concern following this was political change. Before I went to Taipei for university, I come in contact with political dissidents. The Chinese versus Taiwanese distinctions wasn't so relevant among these dissidents back then because they share a common enemy, the KMT, 国民党. So whether they are Chinese or Taiwanese, it's not such a big difference at that time. But now suddenly people think they are Chinese or people think they are Taiwanese, always arguing and fighting with each other nowadays, too bad to say. Upon going abroad for further study after I graduated university, I quickly realized I could definitely be returning to Taiwan. It was only in Taiwan that I could write. Where did my radical Taiwan belief come from that I still haven't figured out? Then probably now I would say it's from my blood. That's why it is always there, and I have to come back to Taiwan from the United States. On my return to Taiwan, I helped some overseas human rights workers to get classified information out of country. And when Simingde seeking funds to establish Formosa magazine, Meilidao 杂志, I provided the first round 100,000 NT, my first year salary as a teacher at Cultural University. After Formosa incidents, the famous Kaohsiung事件, I think talking about the martial law in Taiwan, we have to certainly to deal with the Formosa incidents, Kaohsiung 事件. Most of my friends were arrested and imprisoned, and though I had a Canadian citizenship, my father gave me this Canadian citizenship because he thinks that would protect me in a way. But actually, I don't know whether it worked out or not. For years, I was prohibited from leaving Taiwan, although I have a Canadian citizenship. Okay, I devote myself to my fiction writing and complete The Butcher's Wife. Recently, in writing my latest novel, Secret Chamber Murder, 密室杀人 is my latest novel. I came to see that the dark brutality in The Butcher's Wife, 就是杀夫, my famous kind of novel, that the dark brutality in The Butcher's Wife and its total lack of any power to uplift have a lot to do with the Formosa incidents. I mean, after the Formosa incidents, I was really frightened because I can be jailed easily. And so that's why I write such a dark novel. I think, makes sense. The Butcher's Wife creates a storm of criticism. Readers mail me underwears to humiliate me, assuming that a female writer like me must be having sex day and night and need plenty of panties. People would publish articles cursing me out, and not just me, my ancestor came in for it as well. Still, I went to write Dark Night, 暗夜, and its ending was its ending was banned from publication by the Information Bureau. The Information Bureau is the 新闻局, is the government bureau. That official notice now is on display at the Liang Archive. I have a Liang Archive 李阳文场馆 in 中兴大学 in Taichung. So if you ever come to Taiwan or come to the middle part of Taiwan, come to 中兴大学, so you will see I have this beautiful kind of a small museum things. I have spent quite time doing that, and would be interesting to take a look. I've always had the goal of writing political works. Under the martial law, I know the timing was never right. In the Lost Garden, this work was published by the Columbia University Press and translated by Howard Goblet and his wife. Okay. In this secret garden, Meiyuan, I wrote on the establishment and the reconstruction of Taiwan nationalities, but indirectly through the metaphor of a flower garden. A novel real meaning needs to be left implicit. I have always hated the propaganda and could never bring myself to write didactic fiction that serves as one. I've actually written political biography. I had a plan to write a century of Taiwan women and use as a biographical framing device of the life of Xie Xuehong. Okay, this is a very remarkable woman in Taiwan history. She is a founder of Taiwan's Communist Party. Writing a direct account turned it into a hollow and meaningless political chronicle. Clearly, this sort of writing wasn't for me. Under martial law, it wasn't possible to write directly on, for example, the 228 incident. So I sought an alternative to write historical account of political events, a way that would probe the political even more deeply and exert an even more substance influence. Fiction, well written, I have always felt is much more important than gender or political propaganda. Then comes to early 90s. That's the martial law was lifted in 1987. So comes to the 80s. Even though martial law has been lifted, the white terror could still be there. The white terror is still there. The 白色恐怖 is still there. And when 施明德 was released after 25 years and 5 months in prison, people he had seen on the street and the approach to shake hands would make a hasty retreat, still deeply afraid then of being associated with him. So people wouldn't dare to shake hands with 施明德, even they came across him on the street and 施明德 approached them to want to shake hands with them. They dare not to shake hands with them. They would just retreat and kind of, walk away. I joined in a movement like abolishing the 100 article of the criminal code. That's the famous 刑法100条. The only penalty is death penalty. Okay, believing without a doubt that rights are something we need to stand up and crime for ourselves. I strongly believe that. The human right won't come or just fall upon us without struggling to get it. That's I got from my experience. Okay, but at last, without fear of being shot or jailed, I could start writing about politics openly, not like before when I had to hide political comments in symbols and metaphors in the past. Although writers hid behind code languages, all of us still censor ourselves almost automatically on issues we knew to be sensitive because we fear for our personal safety. This kind of self-censorship, I think, is the main problem for our writing during the martial law. We don't even to have the government to do something to stop us, but we censor ourselves. That's the worst thing. It was during the liberation of the 1990s that I was finally able to gain a kind of liberty that has been so scarce for a long time. Then I processed the freedom to write critically, and I wasn't so old that I couldn't get a pen. There were no more excuse to not write about anything. Of course, the freedom did not guarantee good work, but at least now there's no one to blame, right? No one to complain or to blame. Basically relate to politics, but I didn't care much to comment on current events. I want instead to deal with more profound layers of political reality and of human nature. I wrote about women, power, and sex, the politics of sex. Before I tell you more about them, let's ask first, would one be punished more for writing about politics or sex? Think of it, huh? Generally speaking, I would say the answer probably is politics, right? But let's think about it. Is sex really separate from politics? I would say no. That I was writing the two, I mean, both politics and sex together, mean I was in deep trouble. I was in double trouble because I write both of them. Okay, so I write more openly political fictions. I am going to talk a little bit about this famous one, 北港香炉人人插, the Incense burner of Beigang. It's around 4 female characters in the whole novel. But then it ran into a big storm than any of my work ever had, mainly because this time it was people in power that I was confronting. And for some reason, a female politician in particularly, since the famous this famous woman politician think I used this novel to attack her, and so then I become the writer who is out to harm others. Although there's nothing to do, I mean, with the female politician, I still wonder why she came out to say that's about her, the whole novel. Okay, for a long time after, folks who didn't know me would go around warning others, keep your distance from the young, she will write you into her fiction. But let's face it, it's not that easy to get yourself fictionalized into a novel. These people really had too high an opinion of themselves. Okay, with gay marriage recently legitimate in Taiwan, in this 北港香炉人人插, okay, there is a story has attracted discussion again. The novel 彩妆血记 has been adapted into a dance theater performance in Germany, Austria, and other countries, and win important prize. It's a very well done production and touching a lot of people in Europe and in other places in the whole world. Okay, so it was mentioned the plot here is about a young woman from the upper social class family of the Japanese occupation, marry a well-known physician, a doctor. He was murdered in the 228 incident just after their wedding night, 228事件, the famous 228 incidents. The bride become pregnant, become a fighter in the ensuring resistance. But the intelligence officer who eventually come around to harass wasn't after her. They were after the son she given birth to. Okay, by now, the son become a physician, a doctor in his father's footsteps. But the tragedy is going to occur. One night on his mother's return home, she found him in his room making up as a woman. From that night on, the mother forsake her son, leaving him eventually to fail ill and die. Realizing she was responsible for his death. She took his corpse, his dead body, out, making him up as a woman, dressed him in her own wedding night gown, and said to him, from now on, you no longer need to pretend. One night at a 228 water lantern event, she held her head under the water and drowned herself. By portraying a 228 tragic heroine as the mother of a transgender gay in the 1980s, it was taken to be desecrating. This word is difficult for me, which means you do something you shouldn't, and it's kind of against the God. Desecrating. I'll spell it for you. D-E-S-E-C-R-A-T-I-N-G. Desecrating the memory of the 228 incidents. So now you can see I am not the favorite writer to Taiwan's so-called natives. They, okay, a lot of Taiwanese, they have strong idea of how the 228 incidents to be supreme, and they actually do not like the way I portray this young doctor as a transgender gay. But recently, as Taiwan opened up, this was talked again and attract quite some discussion again. Okay, now there's a little bit problem with my note. Where is wait a second. Page 11 is here. My fiction deal with sex and politics, probably the two biggest taboo of the days, and I have had to take serious break for it. Whether during martial law or since, to me, there's not been much difference. Certain conventional notions have shaped how I have been perceived. Luckily, and up until today, Taiwan has been undergoing rapid social changes, and things are somewhat better now. I used to think that those who could endure martial law must have come through, harm. And to those who couldn't endure, especially for a writer, the harm suffered must have been immense. But as I have grown older, I have become to realize that there is no such thing as making it through unharmed. The shadow of injury remained. What I try to say is to go through this martial law period and to see so much terrible thing happen. Actually, harm writers and certainly me in many ways. Okay, so let me give you an example. I write a novel called The Visible Ghost, 看得见的鬼, in 2003. It's already after martial law left it for like more than 10 years. But this in this story, I wrote some punishment, which is so cruel that I really don't know how it came out from me. Okay, this is the punishment I invent in my novel. In order to punish and humiliate a resistant Aboriginal prostitute, the administrative officers from the Qing government of China cut her belly and created 10 vagina-like injuries, as if there were 10 vaginas on her belly. They meant to insult her, indicating that only a vagina is not enough, and the 10 vaginas would be enough for her status as a sex worker. They also cut her breast off and put her belly muscle into her breast in order to teach that this enlarged breast would be huge enough to match her status as a whole. They slowly tormented her to death. I really have such a description of cruel penalty in my written language. How could this horrifying information came into my mind and become then the written language in my book? Frankly speaking, I have no idea and feel very scared. I'm frightened by my own writing. As a writer, did I really touch upon some of the fundamental connection between sex and the deepest and the most hidden Chinese culture after my long-term learning of Chinese culture during the martial law period? This type of cruel sexuality appear in the sex culture dominated by the traditional sex culture, carry probably the memorial of scars and the past, the patriarchy control. I mean, this kind of thing, what we learn and what my school taught me, remember what I gave you the example in my high school. So probably become really a memorial of scars. And that really influenced me a lot for writing those kind of, dark novel. Okay, I have been a so-called controversial writer all my life. At first, it was because I involved myself as a young person in the opposition movement in Taiwan. Then it was because I wrote about sex, and now contemporary political conflict in Taiwan has called me a native writer. So, which means, I'm not welcome in the other party who believe they are, they be political different. When I was young, I accept the label of controversial writer with no regret. It satisfies my need to resist, to fight for equality, to be free of stigma, and to be authentic. I admit that there is definitely a price to pay to trend on the pace of social progress. From the beginning, I trained myself to have the courage to endure this circumstance, telling myself to not accept unconditional acceptance by others if I wish to write on controversial subjects. However, being a controversial writer at this old age, as I am now, is starting to make me feel a little ridiculous because I'm still called a controversial, but I'm such an old, now I'm old and still being called as a controversial writer make me actually feel a little bit ridiculous. Especially martial law was lifted over 34 years. Okay, so many years ago, this is my final part of the speech. So I'm going to end this speech quickly, so be a little bit patient. Okay, many years ago at the talk I gave in Heidelberg University in Germany, the famous Heidelberg University, a bright graduate student asked me, for a writer like you, who always confronting controversial social taboos, if someday those are no longer taboos in your society, what led for you to do? Good question, right? I was shocked, and at that point, I said, wow, this is really some question for me to think over and over again. But right at that moment, from my intuition, I said to her, there isn't a society that has no taboos, even an advanced society like Germany. Facing controversial taboos, it's just that you need to probe a bit to find them. Only when you came across the taboo, then you know it is a taboo. Until you attack or you touch it, then you know there are taboo in your society. If you don't touch it, then you know, the whole society can be covered under lies. So you really find no taboo. Some among us have paid a tragic price in their lives, working to bring democracy and freedom to Taiwan. Where a novelist like me could have a free hand to write fiction unfettered. To see this within the Chinese-speaking world, it fills me with pride. Even now, I can still say that my openly political novels challenge the boundary, limited sex and political discourse in ways few other works in so-called Chinese literature, 就华文文学, has. Honestly, I'm very grateful for the creative freedom afforded by democracy and freedom in Taiwan. Okay, that's my speech. Forgive my poor English pronunciation, since I'm nervous. I don't speak as well as I used to. Okay, thank you so much for listening to my talk. And it's really a great honor to be able to give a talk here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Meilidao. So thank you.